expressed on this program by its guests do not necessarily reflect the views or beliefs of the host or radio network. And this program's sole intent is to help educate, foster critical debate, and help raise and discuss political and social issues which already exist in the public domain. Thank you and enjoy the program.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this week's edition of the Sunday Wire. I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen. We're streaming out live on the Alternate Current Radio Network and also at 21stCenturyWire.com. Thank you so much for joining us for this weekly omnibus news and analysis radio program brought to you here on ACR. This is episode 342 of the Sunday Wire, I believe. And we've got a powerful show lined up for you today. We'll be joined in the second hour by our roving correspondent for culture and sport, Basil Valentine, for a number of hot stories and some deep analysis on a bunch of things that Basil's trying to wrap his head around. So we'll all do that together, and hopefully we'll come out with some wisdom and knowledge by the end of that segment, as we normally do in the second hour. In the first hour, we're going to talk about what's going on right now in the U.S., in the U.K., the sort of reemergence of talk of a second wave and a second lockdown as we head into the winter months. School is back in session now, and so this has brought up a whole bunch of new issues and flashpoints. We'll cover some of those, and after that, we'll talk about the title of the show is Reflections and Warnings. And so I guess we're doing the warnings first and the reflections second. We, unfortunately, sadly, we lost a few extraordinary people this past week, and we'll talk about them. Professor Stephen Cohen, a lot of people saw that in the news, obviously, in the last 10 days, and also a contributor to 21st Century Wire who our listeners are very familiar with. His name is Andrei Vilcek. Sadly passed away a few days ago. We'll talk about Andrei, and we'll also play one of his last appearances on the Sunday Wire, which we'll play from episode 330, which was live from Santiago, Chile. We'll do that later this hour. And also we had a health scare with Dr. Ron Paul this week. Some of you have probably seen that as well. That was quite something, but we'll give you an update on that situation as well. But let's talk about winter. Winter is here. Winter is here. And with winter comes a whole host of new problems with regards to the COVID crisis. Let's just knock this on the head right now, okay? As we knew, the problem with the madness is the problem with the culture of hypochondria. And that's what it is, ladies and gentlemen. Let's not make any mistake about it. Let's not mince words. The government, the media, the medical industrial complex, we warned about this months ago. In fact, we talked about this right at the beginning of this crisis back in early March of 2020. Wow, it's been almost 7 months. Can you believe it? We talked about the hypochondria culture. The danger here, it's all well and good running this sort of a program, this sort of a psychological program through the spring and summer. But what happens when you start ramping this kind of thing up in the winter? And what do I mean? Well, it's all COVID, 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 coronavirus, 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 novel coronavirus, long COVID, et cetera, and so on for the last 6 months. But now we're coming into winter. And, well, as humans do, they contract the cold, they get the flu. But getting the flu or getting a cold or having hay fever or getting the sniffles in the winter of 2020, as we head into winter, fall and winter of 2020, is a very different thing than 12 months ago in 2019. Think about it. Now when you sit down, if anybody so much as coughs, sniffles, sneezes at any cafe, on a bus, even walking on the street, the terror that you see in people's eyes as they recoil in horror that, God forbid, another human being is experiencing symptoms of coronavirus. Well, it doesn't have to be coronavirus, but it might as well be. Everything is COVID now. Even if it's not COVID, it's still COVID. So we didn't freak out last year, and we survived as a species, as a human race. And the year before, we didn't freak out. We had one of the worst flu epidemics in modern history in 2018, the winter of 2018. 2017, 2018 winter season was really a bloodbath in terms of the flu, and really hitting a much wider age group than COVID, which is extremely focused on the extremely older population. We didn't freak out back then. Now society is shutting down. Businesses are shutting down. Offices are being quarantined. Whole school years are being thrown into isolation. Churches are being shut down. Pro sports leagues canceled, or at least for the fans. Why? Because we're coming into winter. What is rational about this, I ask? How is this logical? On what basis have we changed our behavior to accommodate or react to some new risk when there's no scientific basis for it whatsoever? There's no medical basis for it. What is the basis for it? Well, I think we can all agree that the basis is, there's a psychological basis for it. Can we all agree on that? Yes, we can all agree on that. There's a psychological basis for it. Even the government tells us this. Wear your mask. Wear your mask. Don't do it for yourself. Do it for other people. That's a psychological basis for wearing the mask. Okay? There is no scientific or medical basis right now for declaring a pandemic for COVID-19 based on the numbers we see in terms of hospitalizations and deaths. It's near zero. And the second wave hasn't arrived and won't arrive. What we have is another coronavirus in the mix with all of the other coronaviruses and all the other rhinoviruses and all the other flu strains into the basket of seasonal respiratory viruses. That's what we have. The big epidemic, the big production, the big scare, that already happened. And we're being told that this virus is different. This is different. This virus behaves differently. Well, and I say, how does it behave differently? And they say, well, just you wait. It's coming. The second wave is coming. In a couple of months, it will be here. And we need to take precautions now. We need to shut everything down now. We need to wear masks now, just in case, because we don't want to be wrong on this. That is the mode of thinking. That's the mode of thinking. So if you think that wearing a mask makes any difference at all, they say, well, it's going to decrease the viral load. Decrease the viral load. If everybody wears a mask, it will decrease the viral load. What viral load? What viral load? Which virus? Because if If it's going to decrease of the viral load, what virus? Coronavirus? COVID-19 viral load? If I take the whole population in my town or my village or my city or neighborhood, let's say you live in a population, an average, small city of 100,000, okay? And now, of course, that could be a borough within a bigger city. Let's just say you live in a small city of 100,000, like one of the ones I grew up in. One of the towns I grew up in was about 100,000 city. Now, out of that 100,000, if everybody's wearing masks, how many of those 100,000, according to the CDC or the Office of National Statistics in the UK, how many of those 100,000 have an active coronavirus or COVID-19 infection? An active infection. I'm not talking about those who test positive with a PCR test. No, because those people who test positive with a PCR test do not necessarily have an active infection. In fact, a small percentage of those testing positive with a PCR test would have an active infection. And right now, let's take England, for instance. They're doing local quarantines, local lockdowns and shutdowns. If there's 150 positive tests per 100,000 residents, okay? So think about this, 100,000 people and 150 positive coronavirus tests. And out of those 150 positive PCR tests, how many have an active infection? What percentage? Well, based on the statistics that we're looking at, based on the CDC's own numbers, it's incredibly low. It's ridiculously low, in fact. So those 150 people per 100,000 are all not going to the hospital because A, they don't have any symptoms of COVID or coronavirus. So there's no risk of them dying. So they're not cases. They're not even infections. A small percentage of them may be. What percentage of 150 positive tests? I don't know. 1%? Between 1 and 5%? Something around there? I mean, how many people is that? 2, 3, 4, 5, 10? Let's say 20. 20 out of those 150 positive tests. 20. And out of those 20 that have symptoms, how many fall into the high-risk age group category, which is 75 years or older with multiple long-term chronic health conditions? Because statistically, those are the only people at any serious risk that would be an outlier compared to just the general day-to-day risks that we all have with just about every illness or danger, risk, or respiratory infection. How many out of those 20 people out of the 150 that tested positive? An even smaller percentage. Maybe a handful, maybe 3, 4, 5, something. I don't know. I'm being generous here. So we're drilling down to smaller and smaller and smaller numbers. And at some point, somebody's got to get the hammer on the head to wake up and say, what the hell are we doing? What the hell are people doing? There's no pandemic. It doesn't raise to the level of epidemic or pandemic now. A positive PCR test does not equal a case, nor does it equal an infection. That is a fact. Fact check me if you'd like. Even the inventor of the PCR test, Kary Mullis, warned against using it as a diagnostic tool. It cannot diagnose an illness. That is a fact. Argue with me if you'd like. So take that talking point out into the world and use it, please, everybody, for your own sake. Because what we have now is, people like the BBC running these headlines. I'm looking at it right now. If you want a good laugh, Google this one. BBC, COVID symptoms. Is it a cold, flu, or coronavirus? What do we do? This just the confusion is too much to bear for the BBC. It's almost a panicking headline. What do we do? We've whipped you up into a frenzy, made you paranoid, scared the living daylights out of you now for the last 8 months. And now we're running this in the fall, coming into the fall and winter season. How do we know the difference between a cold, a flu, and COVID-19? They're all different viruses, says the BBC, but they have similar symptoms. Good Lord. What do we do? How did humanity survive this long? It boggles the imagination. I think all the previous generations were just a little bit smarter and just had a little bit thicker skin and a bit more wisdom. What happened to us in the 21st century? We are all losing our rag. How? Why? How did this happen? How have people abandoned their brains and common sense? This is going to be a long winter, folks. And it's not because it's going to be extremely cold, not more than last year, maybe a bit more. We're going into a solar minimum. No, it's going to be long because we're going to be tortured by scare stories about COVID and outbreaks and this and that. Let's see what the intelligence services are saying. Let's look at their in-house newsletter. It's called The Guardian. And The Guardian says, COVID's second coming. How did Britain get back in this mess? And it's almost like this is your typical mainstream media laundry job. Subheadline, some nations have suppressed the virus. Others have stabilized their outbreaks. In the UK, infections are soaring again. Why? All of what I just said in the last 15 minutes has gone right over the head of the brain trust at The Guardian, one of the big media outlets in the world. They speak to a middle-class, liberal, left-leaning audience. So The Guardian's job, as gatekeepers are and sheep herders, is to herd their flock into a cul-de-sac. And that cul-de-sac has a big sign on it which says second wave. Second wave this way. So all the sheep can go into that cul-de-sac and they just keep them basically going around in circles. How did Britain, so the virus is behaving differently in Britain. Why is that? Britain went in lockdown, everyone's wearing masks. All sorts of authoritarian measures have been put in place. Why is there all these outbreaks in Britain? Okay, they're just scratching their head. It's too much. They can't get their head around it. Meanwhile, we just go over the ocean, over to Europe, and hop, skip, and a jump across the bridge from Denmark into Sweden. And, in Sweden, what do we find? Nobody's wearing masks. No one ever did. There's very little, if any, social distancing going on. Everything's open. There was no lockdown. Most of the schools remained open throughout. Basically, very little change went on in Sweden, and its life is normal. And guess what? It would be life is normal here in the UK or in the United States. If they just carried on, life is normal, and this whole, what I would call a circus production between the media and government and the pharmaceutical industry, this whole production didn't happen. All you would see was maybe a few, blips on the statistical radar screen there. But they want you to think that there would be just piles of bodies in the street, like this is the Black Death. But it's not. So we have to suffer this propaganda in The Guardian and all of these mainstream outlets, and they're just going to make a meal out of it. They're going to make a meal out of it. They'll do it all winter. They're not going to stop. And they're requiring people to wear masks. They're requiring all the restaurant staff and catering staff to be wearing masks. It's just unbelievable. And I'll share with you some thoughts that we had on this. Now on the issue of masks. So this concept of insecurity. This is the psychology, the underlying psychology behind this. Okay, this is this concept of insecurity, this pervasive feeling of a lack of safety in one's world. Okay, this more than anything, is a reflection of one's own inner emotional insecurity. The feeling of physical insecurity doesn't mean that you're not safe. It just means you don't feel safe. Why is that? You've been pelted with propaganda and various other reasons. You've been terrorized by the media. We all know they do that extremely well. They're very skilled at that. They do it all the time. All of the tools of the state, of media, of the military-industrial complex working together with media, politicians using deceptions to sell a war to the public. We have a lot of experience with that. It's very effective. It works. So they've now taken that whole system that they normally do to point at a foreign country and sell that to their domestic population. I'm talking about our governments here. They've now taken that whole apparatus, that whole system that they've perfected between government, the media, and the defense industry. In this case, we'll substitute the defense industry with the pharmaceutical industry. So they've taken that apparatus, that holy triad or unholy triad, and they've now pointed that back at their domestic populations. They're now using that same system, and they're pointing it back at the domestic population. There's no one to attack overseas, so now they've decided to attack their own people. So the state has managed to capture that feeling of insecurity, that emotional insecurity, and manipulate that in certain sections of the population. Mind you, it's more effective in some sections than others. Not picking on anybody, but the liberal middle class left seems to be more enthusiastic about this kind of culture of fear and paranoia and hypochondria. I don't know why that is, but maybe it's because they're glued to the mainstream media more than other people. I'm not sure. It has become political. But what's brought society to this point this is the culmination of decades of social engineering, of conditioning, of applied behavioral psychology that has been used by the government, weaponized by the government and corporations, pointed at the public, and this is what's called nudging. And they've been doing this repeatedly in order to nudge the public in the direction of various policies and implement ever-changing rule sets and performance requirements, requiring you to perform various things. I'm talking about health and safety, risk assessments, all of these things. This is decades in the making. Right now, this is the culmination of all of that corporate state. And this has engendered, unfortunately, an increasingly entrenched culture of socialized, learned helplessness. And you only have to look at the relative ease in which the state was able to roll out all of these draconian laws without so much as producing a shred of actual evidence to support its rationale and its claims, even to this day. That's where we're at, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm so sad to see young people working in hospitality, people who are wage earners, and not just young people, older people too. So everybody. I'm sad to see them muzzled at work. They have to wear a muzzle to keep their job. They have to become Karens in order to keep their job. And the look on their face is people that communicate for a living. If you work in hospitality, it's 90% communication. If you take the communication away, the rapport, the banter, the friendliness, you are left with robots. And worse than robots that are muzzled. It's restrained, like chattel working there for an hourly wage. I mean, they need the money, they need the job, and they're making them do that. And for what? They're not at risk, most of them, and neither are most of the punters, if any. Not any more risk than any other seasonal respiratory disease. So this begs the question, is this the new normal? In other words, if COVID's not going to, ravage its way through the population this season, are we just going to do this for the cold in perpetuity going forward, for the flu? Are you kidding me? I didn't sign up for this new normal. There's nothing normal about it. It's abnormal. And where does this leave us with the students? Manchester University in the UK have just put 1,700 students under house arrest in what they call self-isolation. I think this is 2 dormitories worth. Why? Because somebody tested positive, or there were a few positive PCR tests amongst the student population. So they locked down the whole lot. And we're getting reports across America of colleges are renting off-campus apartments and block booking hotels in order to put students in self-isolation quarantine for 2 weeks if they or somebody near them tests positive for COVID, or somebody in their bubble or whatever. I mean, the laws and the rules are arbitrary at this point. But let's just talk about those who supposedly test positive, PCR positive for coronavirus. They're being sequestered into separate facilities and put under observation, stigmatized, not able to socialize, not able to see people, go to parties, do whatever college students do, go to class. Forget about class. And in so many different university settings, we're seeing students spending the majority of their time in their room because of COVID fears or because of quarantine orders or whatever. And we're also seeing this with primary and secondary and high school students as well. Whole classrooms are being sent home for 2 weeks because somebody or a teacher or somebody test PCR positive. Even if a teacher tested positive, why are you sending the whole class home for 2 weeks? And in the UK, they're ordering the students during half-term break to be locked up in their homes. That's right. Most of them will be, by orders of the school, and I don't know where school gets this authority, locked up in their homes over half-term break. What's the point of even having a half-term break? I just keep them at school to catch up on all the education they're missing because of the paranoid, incompetent administrators and teachers' unions that are dictating half of this madness. And the government's just sitting back, twiddling its thumbs, saying, wow, it's just not our decision. But it is. The government's putting pressure on so many different institutions and states to sort of play the game. State, local, national government, they're all sort of at it. And so how's the media covering this? The media is covering it as we expect the mainstream media to cover it. It's how they cover everything. They just do a surface job on it. So this is how the New York Times is covering this. University of Alabama, big featured story here. We've got the nice 18-year-old Sarah Ortebal, a sophomore at University of Alabama, Tuscaloosa. She's been quarantined along with other students in her dorm complex. And the big story here is her mother's an ICU nurse, and she's there to give her support, and because she's isolated and so forth. So they talk all about this, the mental trauma of being isolated, of being quarantined. And this is so typical. This is perfect for CNN or for the New York Times or the Post, and they make it all about the trauma and it's just not normal student life being in quarantine. So they're saying like, oh, isn't it tragic? Isn't it horrible? None of these journalists, so-called journalists, are challenging the basis in which they are putting these students under house arrest, which they call self-isolation. They're not challenging the scientific basis for it. They're not challenging the medical claim or the veracity of the claim that a PCR positive test means anything, especially to a young person who, according to the CDC, have a 99.97% survival rate if they do catch COVID. You got to be kidding me. It's a tiny, 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 minuscule percentage of risk. And they're throwing these policies across. So expanding testing is not crucial to stopping the spread of the virus. So we've already talked about masks. Masks are a placebo. They're just like a placebo. They're making people feel safe. They're making them feel good. They're a placebo. Why? Because statistically, we don't see any pandemic. And all, of course, the pro-mask campaigners are saying, that's because of the masks. It's working. So this is the circular logic that they're employing. I mean, it's fallacious in the extreme, okay? So expanding testing, we need to expand testing. You hear this buzzword, test, test, test. When I heard that last spring, I thought, wow. When I have everyone repeating test, 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 including the World Health Organization, which shows you how little the World Health Organization knows about anything, actually, except ramping up a mass campaign of fear of a pandemic. This is what the WHO are good at, we've learned this year. It's not crucial at all to stopping the spread of the virus for all the reasons I just explained. You can test all the people you want. It's meaningless, absolutely meaningless. What it does is it jams up the system. It causes disruptions. It's ruining the education system. It's ruining business. It's screwing the economy. The only people laughing are the government, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, and Google. Okay, that's who's laughing all the way to the bank. Everybody else, it's a nightmare. Test, test, test. No, don't test, test, test. You're getting lots of data, wonderful, but it's of low quality and of little use. Just more data you can shove into a spreadsheet. But what does it mean? Does it have any epidemiological meaning whatsoever? Not this data, I'm afraid. So this is one of the dumbest, most tragic failures of logic. How did we get here? This is propped up by the mediocre thinking and of course fear. And so this is what we're left with. They are taking a wrecking ball to the education of this generation, higher education. So you're going to what? Go into debt for 120 grand a year, academic year, or whatever it is, 2 years, or 150 grand for 4 years. I don't know what an undergraduate debt load is after 4 years. What? Spending half the year in self-isolation? The UK government are saying students can't go home for Christmas because of the risk of spreading the virus to the family at Christmas. So they're going to lock them up for Christmas, lock the students up on campus. Or if you're living off campus, you're staying at home. What's the point of moving to a different city just to be near a university when you don't have any campus life whatsoever? So the pandemic, the quote pandemic, COVID, is going to destroy higher education. And some people say, well, that's not a bad idea. Hold on for a minute. If this happens, if they get away with this, then society is going to be the loser. It's going to lose badly. Okay, so who should be the first to step up and defend the students on this is teachers. Teachers need to stand, because if they're closing down schools, classes, they're putting people into lockup, and the universities that are doing this to their students aren't even requiring from health officials or the government or the policy itself, they're not even requiring that it meets the basic evidentiary standard that university requires from its graduate students and PhD students for their research to get their doctorate. So they have a high bar for their students to hand out qualifications, but they take that bar and they shove it down to the ground for public health officials and administrators and the government. They don't have to prove that this testing is meaningless. They're all running with this charade of a pandemic. And if university academic institutions and professors and smart people Don't look at this and say, if we're going to let this destroy higher education, then really the institutions themselves are not really fit for purpose at all. Just do it out of selfishness to save your career. If you're a lecturer or a professor or a tenured professor, go on strike just to save your own career. I mean, do it for yourself at least. Forget about the students. You can do it for them if you feel compassionate that they're, this is destroying their whole higher education and stunting them for life. I mean, that's a good cause, but also do it for yourself because you're not going to have a career. You're going to be a surplus to requirement. Now, if you let state and these medical charlatans in white coats, public health officials, if you let them take a wrecking ball to all of these colleges and universities, there ain't going to be any career for you either as an academic. You'll just be they'll just be glorified corporate institutions. Forget about the academy. It's over. It's done. Absolutely done. I mean, what are you teaching? What are we giving to the next generation? What are you imparting on these students? What, that there's a high level of evidence and intellectual inquiry at universities? Well, looking at your COVID quarantine policies and your obsession with meaningless testing, I don't think there is such a thing at universities. You're locking students up for 2 weeks, 1,000 at a time. Are you crazy? Are you people? Have you lost your minds? What are you doing? What are people doing? What are you doing? The students are not really in a position to fight back about it. I mean, they're just going through the motions. I'm calling this systematic abuse of youth, of students, by adults who are either don't have the balls to stand up and call it out for what it is, which is a total sham, and the intellectuals and the academics that should be able to see through what is it doesn't even raise to the level of the scientific standards or the intellectual inquiry that the university itself would require from its own students. So why are they doing it? Simple question. Well, you're going to lose the whole education system if you allow this to continue, and that is no exaggeration. That is no exaggeration. You're going to destroy the principles that higher education purported to have to begin with. Whatever those principles were, those will be long gone by the time this thing is allowed to sort of get its hooks in this deeply into people's lives. So it's a good place to make a stand. Let's hope that some intelligent people step up. We'd like to see that, actually. Very disturbing. So let's change gears a little bit. That was a long rant. Sorry about that. But we had a horrible scare this week. Somebody who is well loved and who's done a tremendous amount, Dr. Ron Paul. Dr. Ron Paul had a medical incident this week. It happened while he was on air during the Liberty Report, his show that he does just nearly every day. So Ron Paul hasn't missed a step, even into his 80s. He's still cracking on, and he had an incident. It happened on air, and it was it's quite unnerving. I'm told that he is, I think, out of the hospital. He's at home recovering right now. It's likely he had some kind of a stroke, but he got an incredible amount of support and love on Twitter. I mean, they posted a picture of him in his hospital bed. It got more traction than anything Trump has tweeted in a long time. I don't know how many thousands of retweets, 30, 35, I have no idea, 40, I don't know. I haven't checked in a couple of days. So that's good news that he is at home recovering. It's a serious warning shot, probably in terms of the work ethic and the frequency And he hits it pretty hard. I mean, he's in his mid-80s practically, and hasn't slowed down much in terms of his productivity. So, well, he might slow down a little bit now, and why not? I mean, gosh, he deserves it, but it really shows you how dedicated Ron Paul is, how much he's put in, what he's done, his commitment to his message of freedom and liberty, and just being a really sane voice in a sea of really foreign policy craziness and interventionism over the last couple of decades. Would have been it's very, very likely would have had a good run at the presidency had the media given him even a fair shake in 2008, and probably more likely in 2012. Instead, they fixed it for a non-runner, Mitt Romney, who was a nothing really in 2012. But Ron Paul would have had a shot at the Republican nomination if we lived in a fair and balanced and honest system. But of course, we don't really have that, not in the United States anyway. So hopefully our thoughts and prayers go out to Dr. Ron Paul and Daniel McAdams. I'll probably be speaking maybe more, give some sort of an update this coming week, I would imagine. Probably go on air with their channel. So do tune into that. We'll try to broadcast whatever we hear or know on Twitter and Facebook. So, and then also we lost somebody, I believe he passed away on September 18th, Professor Stephen Cohen. Professor Stephen Cohen, Professor Emeritus, Princeton University. He also taught at New York, at NYU, I believe. And 81 years old, and really a voice of sanity in the new Cold War. And what a great scholar, what a great career. This is what we wrote at 21st Century Wire about Professor Stephen Cohen. And last week, the world lost one of its greatest intellectual figures in the field of history and international relations. Stephen F. Cohen was a rare breed in today's polarized world of political punditry and analytical discourse, a true scholar and a gentleman who dedicated a large part of his life to advancing diplomacy and working towards making détente a reality and developing East-West accord between Russia and the United States. Cohen was also a tremendous talent on the debate stage, skilled and supremely knowledgeable in his field of expertise, but also incredibly gracious and respectful to his opponents, particularly with those he disagreed with. Truly a class act, learned but down to earth, and someone who cared deeply about avoiding conflict and securing a better future for the United States and the world. That sense of purpose shined through in everything that he did. He'll certainly be missed and will remain an inspiration to many going forward. And his most recent book was called War with Russia, and we put a link to that up at 21st Century Wire in this short piece, Remembering Stephen F. Cohen. And he did a debate. He participated in a debate last year. I think it was in 2019. This was after kind of Russiagate had deteriorated for the Democrats, and he was debating, I think it was Dan Rather, of all people. Yes, it was Dan Rather, I think it was 2019. We've got a short clip from that debate, and listen to this clip, and it just gives you a sense of what a kind, but what a great intellect Stephen F. Cohen was, and how great he was on the debate stage to get people to come to his side, had a certain style, and it's something that we can all work towards. I mean, to be able to approach polarizing conversations in the way that he does is just incredible. So listen to this short clip here from Stephen Cohen debating news anchor legend Dan Rather. Go ahead and roll this.
I will accept the question. Did something happen that really now is not in the historical pattern, even taking into account what Clinton did for Yeltsin, because he did it publicly? I mean, that was not surreptitious. We were camped. It was public. And all I say in the book is, and it's not all I say, because in this environment it's a lot, is I have looked and looked and looked, and I can find no evidence of anything larger and more suspicious. Well, wait, but, I may not be looking in the right places. And it may be that my evaluation, that purported evidence that appears almost every day in the New York Times, I don't find it persuasive. Maybe I've even developed a bias, and a stake in my own argument. I don't rule that out. But I would say, and this is my final word tonight, and this is why I really am worried. If we prevent Trump from doing diplomacy with Russia, that we say he can't do it because he's an agent of Russia. And even though we see crises and potential Cuban Missile-like crises around the world today, and we say we're not going to let Trump do it, in such a crisis, who's going to do it? Congress going to do it? The New York Times going to do it? There's nobody to do it. And if nobody does it, it means war with Russia. And we don't want to test the theory that war with Russia could easily slide into nuclear war. We don't want to test that at all. We don't want to get anywhere near that line. And that's why I think this Russiagate, and I call it in the book such, has become the #1 threat to American national security. The #1 threat. We can hate on Trump all we want, but until we vote him out, we have to entrust him to keep us safe if a crisis like this occurs. That's my bottom line. Now, maybe it's alarmist, maybe it's extremist, maybe it comes from too much Russia on my brain. Maybe, but maybe not. Maybe not. And
so, as you can see, one of the few adults in the room in the conversation of the U.S. and Russia relations about Russiagate. He wrote regularly for The Nation magazine. His wife actually was the editor of The Nation up until last year. Now she's, I believe, editor of the editorial section. But yeah, I mean, his career is amazing. He was instructive to even Mikhail Gorbachev. He had his influence extended that far. All this is detailed up at 21st Century Wire. We took sections from a few different good commentaries, obituaries on Stephen Cohen. So I do encourage people to read what we posted there, and you'll know a lot more about him, his career. But as you can, even from that clip, you can hear people like this are very rare, unfortunately, in those higher circles of academia and punditry. And so he will be missed. He will be missed. Hopefully, he'll also inspire people going forward. Now, we were a bit shocked to find out that one of our contributors at the Sunday Wire, at 21st Century Wire, passed away this past week. Andrei Vilcek, who's been on this show a number of times and who's written extensively for 21st Century Wire and for so many other publications. He himself is author of, I don't know how many books, over a dozen books, both nonfiction and novels as well. He's written plays and countless articles. He's traveled all over the world. A truly intrepid journalist, Andrei Vilcek, an incredible life story as well. I mean, I only knew him, for the time really that we worked together here. He was also freelancing and working for a number of other publications, and he had his own independent projects always on the go. He's also made a couple of great documentary films over the years, and he also worked on, co-authored a piece of work with Noam Chomsky called On Western Terrorism. That's also available on the link. If you click on the show page, it'll take you to Andrei's page at 21 Wire, and there's links to all of his books and his work at the bottom of his biography there. But Andrei was an extraordinary person. The initial reports did pique some concern. It's happened in Turkey. He was with his wife, had just spent 9 days at Samsun. I think that's on the Black Sea, in the northern part of Turkey on the coast of the Black Sea, and it's a long drive back to Istanbul. This is where he was decamped, had left Chile. When we last spoke to him, he was in Chile. We'll play a clip in a minute, an interview that we did this summer with Andre, one of his last appearances on the show. And when they arrived at their destination after a long drive, this was a rented chauffeured car, Andre was not responsive and was taken to the hospital and pronounced dead shortly thereafter. He's only 57 years old, and initially the Turkish police announced that they were investigating possible foul play. So we'll see. That's inconclusive. There are also statements that have been made that he was in poor health as well. So it's not certain. We wouldn't want to jump to any conclusions. I would imagine his family will make a statement at some point to clarify, if not the authorities in Turkey. But yeah, he was had a number of things and challenges, a few health challenges as well that he was constantly battling. But we'll wait and see what else comes from that. But as a journalist, Andre was one of a kind. There was nobody like him. Nobody did the miles that Andre Vilcek did. If there was a frequent flyer club, he would have had one of the best frequent flyer mile memberships, because he traveled, by his own admission, he was in a different country nearly every week. And he was writing the whole time. He was publishing stuff the whole time. And, he pretty much, he has been published in mainstream earlier in his career, but he's really shut out of the mainstream in the last couple of years. But you'll find his work all over the place. I mean, it's just an unbelievable body of work. I personally have not met anybody who was as driven, who was as dedicated, who was as committed to his work, and also to his political mission as well. Andre made no secret about his political position. He was a revolutionary socialist, a revolutionary communist in the international sense. That was his politics in most of his adult life. A very interesting story. He left the Soviet Union in the 80s, was a refugee in the United States, a political dissident from the Soviet Union, was naturalized as a U.S. citizen. So he was a dual Russian-American citizen, grew up in Eastern Europe. And his father was from the Czech Republic, I believe. His mother was of mixed descent. And Andre has been to, 170 countries, something like this. I mean, there is really, or 140, 170, I'm not sure how many, but more than, right around there. I don't think there's anybody that has done more miles and seen more in the world and reported more in the world, really, in that space of time than Andre Vilcek. And we were very fortunate to be able to commission, we commissioned 9 pieces from Andre just in the last 12 months. And I worked on a few short video reports with him from Paris, from Chile, from Colombia, and from possibly, I think, from Bolivia as well. But those are up on our YouTube channel. And Andre's, his catchment area was not confined to any country. He was on the move, and he believed strongly in the struggle, the plight of people who were really victims of colonialism traditionally, and the sort of the international neo-colonialist corporate juggernaut, and saw a lot of the civil wars and instability in a lot of countries, including Syria. He was on the ground there early on reporting in Idlib, on the Turkish border, in the Philippines, with the sort of battle against ISIS there. So many different locations, Africa, the Congo, Borneo, in Indonesia. He was everywhere. It's incredible. His work is incredible. Andre and I probably didn't see eye to eye ideologically and politically, but we had very much a lot of synergy in terms of he was very much an anti-elitist. I probably fall into that category. I do, actually. So we saw eye to eye on many things. We disagreed on many things, but we saw eye to eye on many things. And I strongly believed, I still do, it's not easy, but I believe that our platform, 21st Century Wire, is an independent media platform. I will work with people who are conservative, who are liberal, who are free marketeers, who are socialists. I'm looking at the quality of the journalism, because the way I saw Andre would travel to Cuba, he would travel to South America, to Asia, to the Middle East, and he would tell the story of the people that he was wanting to, he wanted to tell a story that wasn't being told in the mainstream media, from the native people, the working class, from the left wing, the socialist government, or whoever was being leaned on by Western governments and intelligence agencies in many cases. So he was letting them tell their story through his lens, basically. So they were sort of borrowing Andre to tell their story, and he would tell their story through his unique lens, his unique worldview. He had a lot of compassion for people. There's no doubt about that. He believed in giving people basic dignity. He thought that was something that was in short supply, and he's right. And he wanted to redress some of these issues himself through his work, through physically putting himself in that position on the ground to tell the story. I think he made a huge impact. I think he made a huge difference. I mean, he was able to report and be a witness of so many different things over the years, much of which goes into the historic record. So from that sense, he's been fantastic. He was against the sterilization of uber modern corporatized society. He was, he lamented the lack of art, the lack of poetry, the lack of real life, all of the things that are so missing, increasingly so in today's bland corporate culture. Andre was definitely against all of those things. And so he was not, Andre, the last thing I'll say was Andre wasn't naive. Andre wasn't a naive crusading revolutionary. He knew that the world, pardon my French, Andre would say it too. He knew that the world was a world of contradictions. He knew that people weren't perfect. He knew it was a shit show. He knew it was a shit show. Imperialism and the world, neocolonial, it's a shit show. Andre would say that too, probably. So he wasn't so naive to think that there's a perfect system or a perfect revolution or that people are perfect. He would even say he's not perfect. He's very honest in that sense. And for that reason, very unique, very rare. I got a tremendous amount of respect for Andre, his work, what he wanted to achieve. Again, we don't see eye to eye, but I believe that the 21st Century Wire should have different points of view, if possible. And the Sunday Wire should show some different points of view, and certainly Andre provided a very different point of view than we would get from anybody else, full stop. And for that, his contribution was incredibly valuable. So we'll roll out here. We have the last interview he did on this show. He was under lockdown in Santiago, Chile. And this was episode 330 of the Sunday Wire. I believe it was June 21st, 2020, just 3 months ago. And we'll play this interview. This is kind of where Andre was at this summer. He had just come from, escaping from Hong Kong, I guess you could say, and under lockdown was struggling with a lot of what was going on in Chile. It definitely kept him from moving and doing the things he wanted to do. And there was a lot of things going on at the same time. The world is in turmoil, and he describes that very well. So this is episode 330, our interview with Andre Vilcek. I believe it was one of our last interviews with Andre at 21st Century Wire. We'll go ahead and roll this, and I'll come back to usher us into the break after this. Go ahead and roll it. All right, welcome back. Welcome back, everybody, to the Sunday Wire. I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen. We're streaming out live on the Alternate Current Radio Network and also at 21stcenturywire.com. Now, our next guest is an intrepid writer, a filmmaker, an author of many books. There's a link on the show page to a list of his titles, which you can delve into. And his name is Andre Vilcek. And he's joining us right now on the live link from South America, from the country of Chile. Hello, Andre.
Patrick, hello. Great to be back.
Great to have you back. It's been a while, Andre. I was getting worried. We didn't know what happened to you. But from what I hear, Andre, you know, a lot of the world is coming out of this so-called lockdown from COVID. Countries, European countries, the schools are open. Life is returning to normal. Some parts of the U.S. are even kind of returning to normal. A lot of Asia has returned to normal. But there's a few countries that are clinging to this crisis, and they're actually keeping very strict lockdown measures going now. And one of those countries is the country that you're in right now, which is Chile. This is extraordinary. But we thought South America might be more relaxed, some of these countries, about this crisis and want to kind of get over it as soon as possible. What is going on in Chile?
Well, the main reason, actually the only reason I disappeared, Patrick, for quite some time is because I'm locked down in Chile already since March, when I arrived here from after 8 days journey from Hong Kong. So basically, I was processing my new books and writing enormous amount of essays, but I couldn't move. And this is the first time in my life that I stayed for such a long time in one place since I was perhaps 15. So I never stay longer than 1 or 2 weeks. I'm traveling all over the world, covering the events on all continents. But in Chile, where I landed in March, since March, actually, there is an absolutely draconic and absolutely unreasonable and bizarre lockdown. Bizarre, of course, if you don't analyze and if you don't realize what is going on, but very logical from the point of view of Chilean dictatorship or Chilean regime, more precisely. Chile has been officially, Chile now is in an extremely tough lockdown for 1 month, but in reality, it is already since March. People are going crazy, economy is collapsing, families are getting ruined, but President Sebastián Piñera, a right-winger and supporter of former dictator Augusto Pinochet, is actually getting mileage out of it, and he's making sure that the protests, powerful protests which shook Chile at the end of last year, will not return, at least for some period of time.
And those were huge. I know you reported on this earlier when the protests were happening. You did a number of great video reports as well, and on this show. But you also, at that time, Andre, the protesters had certain demands. They were very close, or they had got some agreement in terms of a national referendum. I mean, this is a big deal, and constitutionally in Chile, and that was already supposed to happen months ago. And what's happened to the progress of these sort of demands and these things that came out of that national protest? What's the status of this?
Well, they scared the population into submission, at least for some time. So when I was making videos for you, and we were working very closely at that time, me and 21st Century Wire, on the coverage of the protests. What was going on then? People began waking up. They realized that democracy was actually stolen from them. So when officially democracy returned after Pinochet stepped down, the country was governed by several coalitions, so-called concertations between officially left-wing socialists and officially, at least, center-left Christian Democrats. And during that period of time, it looked that democracy was returning to people and that Chile is going to have a brand new start. But in fact, they found out last year, they began realizing that there was a deal between the old dictatorship and that concertation and the elites in Chile, and actually nothing whatsoever changed. So Chile continued for decades to be governed by the neoliberal model. Education, healthcare were still privatized, and big companies, including agribusiness, were actually running the country. So people rose. There was a huge uprising. Thousands, tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands were battling police and the army around then Plaza Baquedano, which was then renamed to Plaza Italia, and officially the Dignity Square. Some 30 people lost their lives. More than 300 people lost their eyes because police was extremely brutal. They were shooting protesters to the face with rubber bullets. So it was a very powerful uprising, very dangerous, because Piñera sent tanks to the streets, and it began looking like, after the coup on 9/11, 1973, tanks and the military, police battling protesters right in the middle of Santiago de Chile. And then it looked like Piñera's popularity was collapsing. It was in one digit, 7 to 9%. And then suddenly COVID-19 or coronavirus hit. And there was a good excuse for the government, good in parentheses, to actually reintroduce martial law to create extremely tough restrictions of movement and all that. So just to give you an example, one of the symbols, like what is happening now in the US with the statues, right? The statues are going down of Columbus and so on. In Chile, there was a huge statue in the middle of the square where the uprising was taking place around Baquedano, and it was a statue to Chilean General Baquedano, who was basically a butcher who murdered countless amount of Peruvians and Bolivians in a war of Pacific, in which Chile, teamed up with the United Kingdom and destroyed two countries. Bolivia lost access to the sea and so on. So Baquedano proudly decorated the square. And the protesters totally desecrated the statue, and they put the graffiti, and they were trying to put it down, but it was so humongous, so enormous, they couldn't do anything, but it was desecrated. And then one of the first things when the COVID-19 hit and Santiago was under quarantine, or basically under the martial law almost, the government restored the statue. They painted it beautifully, as if it would be a priority. And Piñera, the President Piñera, one evening came to take selfie in front of it, like saying, look, what are you going to do? I'm winning. So now it's standing there. The city is trashed still because, it's full of homeless now because economy collapsed, full of graffitis from the uprising time. It's totally destitute. Look, but the statue is beautiful, it's black, beautifully painted, newly painted. And it is kind of a symbol of how the revolution or uprising had been at least postponed.
And yeah, that's incredible. So you said graffiti's everywhere. I know there was a lot of damage that I saw in your reports. Art, cultural centers and small businesses, cafes, all the really interesting places that made Chilean culture really vibrant and colorful. All this has been shut down, and in disrepair as well. So the city must look like it's just gone through a war, basically.
Yes, it is totally different place. I used to live in Chile 20 years ago, approximately. And there came the time when I was leaving, when I said to many people that, look, it's more interesting now than Rome or Amsterdam, because Chile was such an incredibly vibrant culture. They had enormous cultural centers, theaters, concert halls. You wanted opera, got opera. You wanted Algerian jazz, you got Algerian jazz. Or, things totally that you couldn't hear or see anywhere else in the world, from the greatest singers and musicians to avant-garde left-wing theater. It was brilliant in that period of time. And when I came back, it was already deteriorated. It was even before the uprising. Chile became this neoliberal model again. There was things became mass-produced in terms of food. A lot of chain restaurants from the United States, a lot of junk pop music. I mean, in my days, 20 years ago, you would go to a cafe and people were so obsessed with everything different. They would listen to Arabic music, to African music. They wanted to hear something totally different, see something different. Now it is becoming like Indonesia almost, neoliberal model, which is obsessed with making money and all that. During this lockdown, you wouldn't believe I have a Yahoo UK on the computer because I want to see something sometimes what the official propaganda in the West is saying. So whenever I open a Yahoo UK, there is a big banner, local banner advertisement. It says President Piñera is going to tell you how to become rich. In Spanish, can you imagine? I mean, the people are losing their livelihood. There is a tremendous decline in terms of the GDP. The GDP is down 5.3%. In entire Latin America, 30 million people are hitting the poverty. In Chile, there are riots of poor people who cannot anymore survive. And the president is sending tanks against them and water cannons in the cold. We have winter, it's cold now. So they're spraying these poor people with water cannons who can hardly eat. And then you go to Yahoo and what does it say? President Piñera will teach you how to become rich. Become rich, whom is he going to teach? Few people who are playing stock market. So it's absolutely immoral what is happening here. So Chile is totally collapsing now. Morally, it is collapsing. The Mapuche leaders, Mapuche are indigenous people in the south. They were always discriminated. They were robbed of everything. The land, forests are being cut down for agribusiness and all that. And what do we learn? That on June 4th, one of the Mapuche leaders, Alejandro Treuquil, was killed in the south. And nobody has, except Telesur in Venezuela, had any decent reports on this. And apparently this is not the only case. I mean, Mapuche people are getting robbed under the cover of COVID, of lockdown. The same what is happening in Brazil, where the indigenous people are getting infected, indigenous leaders are being killed and battered, and the rainforest is being disappeared because no government or non-government organizations or press can actually enter rainforest under the cover of COVID.
And Bolivia, similar things are happening under COVID restrictions?
Oh God, yes, of course. Thank you. Yes, in Bolivia, of course, as well. Everything is being postponed. The referendum that you mentioned, constitution referendum in Chile, is being indefinitely postponed. Bolivian elections are being indefinitely postponed. I'm here sitting here with my four-wheel drive, ready to hit the road. I left Asia to cover Bolivian elections and referendum here. I was supposed to drive to Mapuche land in the 10th region and further south. And what am I doing? I'm sitting here in the apartment overlooking snow-covered Andes, and all I can do is to go to some little park where the owners are airing their dogs, because this is the only exceptions that people have. This is not some British lockdown. This is real stuff. There is a new in this fascist regime. You can go to up to 5 years to prison if you defy the lockdown, and you can pay $15,000 of fine. Can you imagine? This is okay. This is OECD country, and it's on the highest human development index of UNDP officially. But it is a country where people are happy with the incomes of like $7,000-8,000 a year. And what is it? $15,000 for defying the lockdown, or 5 years in prison? And they mean it. There are police, there are Marines everywhere. There is a riot police. This is unbelievable.
And how long are you allowed to go out each day? What's the What are the rules, official rules on that?
You are not allowed to go at all. You can go only if you have a dog. You can go for 20 minutes to the radius of 2 blocks. Or you can go if you have a permission. You can prove that you need a food, or you have to go to pharmacy. So you can go twice a week. And the old people, can you imagine? Old people are totally locked down. They can go nowhere. So just look at the logic of all this. You protect these people who actually need to exercise. They need to. Some of them are lonely. Some of them are, and you basically kill them almost by these lockdowns just to protect them. So it is. Look, I have a mixed feeling. We agree on something, you and I, or disagree on others when it comes to COVID. But here, this is so absolutely clearly a fascist insanity that this government is doing. And the problem with Chile is they always try to ape the West, particularly Europe. So they, on the surface of it, they do precisely what France or Italy or Spain or UK did, but only on the surface, because they cannot actually do it, even to the extent as Europe did it. Even if Europe is wrong, they did it twice worse in Chile. There is 7,144 deaths in a country of 18 million. And this is, so you take it for per capita basis. Chile has had 236,000 infections today. It ranks number 9 in the world, but if you rank it on per capita basis, basically on 1 million inhabitants, then it's number 2 after Qatar. That's insane. Mm-hmm. So they are even if they would even if this lockdown would be supposed to save human lives, it doesn't. It's the opposite. Mexico is an enormous country, like 10 times bigger in terms of population than Chile. It is 175,000. And even in terms of deaths, it is 20,000. It's a lot. But Chile has 7,000 with 18 million.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, it doesn't make sense they have 4,200 deaths to date in Chile, population, like you said, 18.
7,144. They are totally screwing up numbers. They fired the Minister of Health because they keep manipulating even the press, which is totally obedient. It was neoliberal system, it's owned by corporations. Even press is starting to yell at the government. They cannot take it anymore. So the official number of death today in Chile is 7,144. They keep adding 30%. They keep taking back. It's going up and down. There is nothing like going up and reaching plateau. It looks like some kind of a dragon's back. It's up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. They added 30% of casualties because they couldn't calculate correctly. So this is this collapse of the neoliberal medical system, which they kept. The great Maggie Thatcher's example that she kept giving to everybody about how great Chilean economy really was. It was built on the Chicago School of Economy. All these people like von Hayek, like Friedman, all this big wet dream of Thatcher and Reagan and all these things that they even couldn't implement in the UK or in the US to the full extreme. So this was a laboratory, the experimental laboratory. And look at it now. Look at it now. They cannot look at their medical system. They cannot really fight even COVID to the point that it would resemble at least some normalcy. Even Brazil is worse. It's better than Brazil is a famous case, right, of absolute collapse, and it is collapse. But Chile, in terms of numbers, is worse than Brazil, and the government is still there, and nobody is suddenly fighting.
Yeah. Well, what we're finding in the UK is that there's more deaths that are being attributed to lockdown than to COVID, like deaths resulting from lockdown. People who needed cancer screenings who didn't get them, people who have strokes or heart conditions, they're not getting the early treatment that normally can save lives. This is one of the collateral damage from this kind of intense lockdown policy. And I think Chile is... Yeah,
precisely, but it is. I have to say, from Latin America, I have to say one thing. Of course, what happened in UK is terrible, and it's happening here or in Brazil is terrible. I have 2 crowns that broke off my teeth. I need to go to dentist, and they go buy books. So he tells me, "Okay, I will take you, but." You have to go to the hospital and get a panoramic X-ray of your mouth. I said, "You really?" Because in the hospitals here, it is all COVID. As you say, there is no any more treatment of other diseases. Almost, it is just absolutely horrible because the system. Intensive care is stretched to the limits, and people are treated basically only for COVID. If you get stroke, if you get cancer, if anything happens, you're absolutely screwed. The families are getting destroyed here. You know what is happening here? The poverty rate is growing incredibly, and I told you there are riots now. People are fighting for food. But also, just to show you how inept this government is, they have this so-called emergency family salary, but they promised $100 per person, and they actually didn't manage to distribute this money for weeks and months. And then when they started to distribute it, their system is so bad, so inefficient, that they started to distribute food baskets to MPs. Even like one MP from relatively rich neighborhood of Ñuñoa, she went public and she said, "What the hell are they doing? I don't need food basket. I am MP." But they are distributing these food baskets to the rich neighborhoods, and poor people are starving. So it's absolutely inept, absolutely collapsed, neoliberal, bizarre system.
So lastly, we got a couple minutes left, but how long is it sustainable for? I mean, they might have delayed the protests or delayed the referendum, but at some point the penny is going to drop, and it's just too much, and people aren't going to be believing it anymore. How long do you think they can maintain this?
Oh, they are threatening 3 months. 3 months more of this. The whole country is closed. There is only one flight going internationally regularly, like 2-3 times a week, is to Miami. Of course, they cannot live without Miami, which they call Miami. That's for all the rich, the escape route. But this is gonna last. He's threatening already, or he's imposing another 3 months, and it's with all these draconic, tough measures. So the consensus here is that people who used to protest in October, November, December, they will be back in the streets soon. They will be back in full force, because once the people here, this is not sustainable. People are living in the parks, in the streets. Chile, with all the social problems, was priding itself that it never had these horrible homeless issues like Paris or United States cities. This was not really something that we were used to see. And this is what's happening now. There are thousands of people living on the streets. Venezuelan people who came because of embargo, they came searching for jobs. They were living on the streets. They were living in front of the Venezuelan embassy, asking their government, please take us back to Venezuela, because Venezuela has much better COVID policy, and now they don't have any jobs here. So they were in the freezing cold. They were living in Providencia in front of the Venezuelan embassy before the communist mayor of the neighborhood called Recoleta took them to house them, actually, in the private houses and B&Bs. So it's this is how low things collapsed in Chile. The Mapuche leaders being killed, homeless people all over, and poor people rioting for food and being met with water cannons. This is Chile of 2021 under the right-wing government of President Sebastián Piñera and his clan.
Yeah, which sounds like an extension of Augusto Pinochet, actually, how you're describing it.
It is. He is a great admirer of Augusto Pinochet. A niece of Augusto Pinochet was in his government before she resigned. And he already, for tens of years, keep talking with great respect about Augusto Pinochet. The Nazi colony Dignidad, the Nazi camp during the Pinochet regime, people were raped and tortured and disappeared, is again producing sausages and bread. You go to supermarket, Villa Baviera, former colonial Dignidad, they are still there. They are. We thought we closed them down. No, they are still there, selling their Wurst, selling their sausages to public.
So one last question I want to ask you is unusual policy here from the Piñera government is in the sense that Chile this government is kind of a client government of Washington, D.C. Do you think that the orders came from Washington to keep this lockdown going in order to kind of crush the uprising, as it were, from early this year?
I don't want to speculate. I have no proof, but I wouldn't be surprised, because actually the three client states in Latin America are Colombia, now Brazil, and of course Chile. Historically, the orders, I don't know if they came directly, but they're all kind of indirect cooperation between Chile, United States, and United Kingdom. Don't forget that during the Malvina War, or what you call Falkland War between UK and Argentina, this is the country which was spying on Argentina, using its installations high in the mountains in the Andes, on behalf of the Maggie Thatcher. So, I mean, this is nothing is surprising here. Now, of course, another client state now is Bolivia after the horrible coup. But Chile is definitely a client state. What do they discuss between Trump and Piñera? It's secret. We don't know. But I wouldn't be surprised if there is some kind of a coordination. because don't forget, this is a war against the left that is being led by the United States. A horrible war, which already damaged tremendously Brazil, and which put the fascist government of Agnes to power, kicking out from power Evo Morales, great Bolivian indigenous president. And now there are rumors, if you speak, that in Mexico too, that President Andrés López Obrador is facing very dangerous situation with the elites. I was just reading it on Orinoco Tribune, and I heard it from my friends. So it is a very complicated, very dangerous situation, and definitely, of course, there is a cooperation between Washington and the La Moneda presidential palace here in Santiago de Chile.
Yeah, the Organization for American States is one of the levers of control that Washington runs in order to sort of push out policy through various South American countries. And so no doubt that's one of the keys there. But yeah, and Mexico resisted the lockdown, by the way. They were very late.
Yes, yes, Mexico. They keep giving numbers, to discredit Mexico. Numbers are relatively high, but you know what? It's also the biggest Spanish-speaking country on earth. It's a tremendous country. So if Mexico infection in Mexico is actually 175,000 and Chile has 236,000, Mexico is 10 times bigger. Mexico debt is 20,000, Chile is 7,000. Just calculate, 10 times bigger, it would have to be 70,000 in Chile as to compare to 20,000 in Mexico. Mexico is actually doing tremendous job. And Obrador said, and I don't quote, I'm just paraphrasing, that, Mexican people are not children. Let them decide. Let them decide what to do. And I'm not going to treat them like children. And his popularity is extremely high.
Yeah, that's the way you have to govern. I mean, that's a strong contract between government and people. And the countries that are doing that, I think in the long run, are going to engender a lot of trust in the government and the people, and they will be likely stable. That's probably why the U.S. and others are training their crosshair sites, the CIA and so forth, on country like Mexico, because they don't want that stability. They want it to be unstable.
No, Obrador has a great respect for his people, and he expressed it not through words only, but through his politics, through his policies, and people have tremendous respect for him too. So it's very beautiful, gentlemanly agreement. But if you look also at Cuba or Venezuela, all these countries are doing, all these socialist countries are doing so much better, incomparably better with this right-wing, like Colombia, like Peru, like Chile, where this total lockdowns are in place.
Yeah, Ecuador as well.
Oh my God, yes. Ecuador is terrible. But again, even Ecuador, can you believe it? Even Ecuador is, it has 49,000, today 49,731 cases of infections, 236,000 in Chile. So even a horrible collapse Ecuador, where the Lenin Moreno totally betrayed his previous government, in which he was of Korea. Even Ecuador, which is a known case where bodies were piling in Guayaquil, and all this is doing better now than Chile. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, we hope the situation changes course for you there in Chile. Definitely, that does not sound good at the moment.
I'm going to, so I can cover the stories for you, personally, because this is absurd. I'm covering it from the 15th floor overlooking Andes. That's not me, I'm whenever things happen, I'm there.
Well, we'll have you smuggled out, basically, over the border to Argentina. Maybe I'm not sure.
No, because Argentina is locked down too. I'm going to US hopefully in 2-3 weeks because I have to see what's going on there firsthand.
Yeah.
But through Miami, of course.
Yeah. The escape route to Miami. Yeah, you'll be there with all the elites in flying coach.
I know.
Wearing your mask, and.
Well, I wrote somewhere. I said I'm willing to wear the condom, or kind of enormous Macintosh plastic coat and combat gas mask, which I have actually for after covering so many uprising and riots and revolutions all over the world and wars. I have a gas mask. I said I'm willing to wear it on the plane. Just let me on board.
Yeah, I know. It's tempting, isn't it? It's tempting. Well, listen, take care, Andre.
Patrick, listen, it's always great to be on your show. I hope to talk to you soon.
Yes, definitely. Take care, Andre. That's Andre Vilcek, author, filmmaker, intrepid writer. You can look at his work. There's links on the show page. Yeah, that was episode 330. Fantastic segment with Andre. What a great interview. I think that was his last appearance on the Sunday Wire, on 21st Century Wire. And, you can't get conversations like that. I mean, where do you get that level of political reporting? Where else do you get it? And I haven't seen it anywhere. So, it was a great honor to be able to do what work we did with Andre in the last 18 months. And, he's going to be very much missed by a lot of people. Nobody really worked and did reporting like Andre Vilcek. He was a force of nature, and everybody that knew him could attest to that. He was very much an unstoppable force of nature, and he did. He saw a lot. He saw a lot, and he observed a lot. And he was able to translate that and share it with people in a way that only he could. So Andre Vilcek passed away this week. We'll have a follow-up article at 21st Century Wire. I'm going to write a piece. I'm working on it now. It might be ready Monday, maybe Tuesday. I'm taking my time with it. I think it's an important piece because he's done such important work. And so look for that at 21 Wire tomorrow or Tuesday. We're going to take a short break, and we're going to connect our roving correspondent for culture and sport, Basil Valentine, on the other side. This will be a short break. We'll be right back in just a minute or so. I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen. Stay right there.
there's one thing I've learned about experts. They're experts on fuck all. If there's a rule, you can bend it. If there's a law, it can be broken. And from now on, I'm breaking all the rules. Because desperate men do desperate deeds.
All right, welcome back. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Sunday Wire, the final segment of Overdrive. I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen. We're streaming out live on the Alternate Current Radio Network and also at 21stCenturyWire.com. Thank you for rejoining us. And that was quite a segment just passed. If you missed any of this live broadcast, if you're just chiming in now, you can get the recording in the podcasting format later after the show, and also tomorrow will be up on 21st Century Wire, Spreaker.com, up at the ACR channel, Alternate Current Radio channel, Spreaker, iTunes, Spotify, and a number of other platforms. So you can listen to everything. Don't feel like you missed anything. You can always go back and listen after the show and during the week. And we encourage you to do so and share this program to as many people on social media as you can. If you are a fan, if you are a follower, and you like what we do tell other people to tune into. Everybody that comes on board on this show tends to become a regular listener, and we're so happy and grateful for everybody that is. And also anyone who is supporting this show. There's a few of you out there. Subscribers to 21wire.tv especially, but also people who have donated in the last couple of weeks. Thank you so much for your support. What you do keeps this platform alive, vibrant, and doing great work. So this is definitely a crowd-powered media outlet, and you play such a crucial role in getting the news out and providing quality information, commentary, and analysis, like you heard just before the break. From people like Andrei Vilcek, sadly not with us anymore, but there's a lot more work to do. We'll be building on what we've done before going forward. We'll keep going. We've got a big election season coming, so things are going to be hotting up in the next month, no doubt about it, and we'll see. We'll see where this road leads us. Now, our roving correspondent for culture and sport, Basil Valentine's on the line, and Basil has been keeping a keen eye on things that are going on in the UK and beyond. And hello, Basil. How are you doing this week? What's happening in the world?
Good evening, Patrick. Good to be with you.
Great to be with you.
Well, we've got to start really with the demonstration in Trafalgar Square yesterday, the We Do Not Consent demonstration, and the fallout from it. Fallout being the operative word, because quite a few protesters were knocked over, it seems, by the police, who tolerated speeches by Piers Corbyn and David Icke, but then broke up the demonstration, confiscating the PA equipment and getting the crowd to disperse before the German doctor had a chance to speak. So this has caused fairly major ripples, not least of which the outcome of the outcome, for want of a better expression, and how social media has reacted to it has been very interesting, because I've seen a lot of people saying, leftists saying that those on the demonstration, who included a lot of lifelong socialists I've known, but basically a cross-section of the British public, a more grassroots gathering, it is hard to imagine. But apparently they've all been co-opted by the far right, because apparently people like the BNP and various others were in support of yesterday's demonstration. Of course, some people regard David Icke, a highly controversial figure, as being of the far right, even though he spent the last 30 years warning against an impending global fascist tyranny. So we have a situation where the state used the apparatus of its physical control on the streets to break up peaceful demonstration and silence dissent. And yet, leftists are saying that the fascists were the peaceful protesters being silenced, and the state is not fascist at all. It's a total inversion of what reality is. But I'm afraid that's where we are now. It's guilt by association, you see. The fact that people like Nigel Farage, who apparently is thinking of creating his own anti-lockdown political party, it's the fact that you are a fellow traveller with the likes of Nigel Farage that means that you have been duped. Do you see, Patrick?
Yeah, yes. Yeah, the mainstream media are doing what you've just described there, as well as the left, the labor left, are doing that as well. So ad hominem guilt by association, that's the correct term there. And what I've seen, and I think you'll agree with me on this, Basil, I see this as a very inclusive movement and campaign. And I just watched a event in Northern Ireland, in Belfast, and it looks to me this is the first political campaign that has brought Catholics and Protestants together in Northern Ireland. You know, it's an anti-sectarian movement, and I think it's the same in England and everywhere else. So, you know, shame on the media, shame on the Blairite wing and so-called socialists on the left for trying to paint this as a right-wing movement. You got to be kidding me. The only saving grace I think we can count our blessings that Tommy Robinson absconded to Spain. Touch wood, he's not going to come back and try to co-opt this one. But you know, it's to say that someone likes it or endorses it, whether it's the BNP or anybody else, throws a banner or a sign up and then somehow that makes it right-wing, is patently ridiculous.
Well, for me, the hard right has for many years now been the neoliberal centre. That's where the fascists are. If we cast our minds back to the end of the last century, it was Tony Blair's Labour government that wanted to introduce compulsory identity cards. You know,
that's right.
And the two wings, both libertarian socialist wing and libertarian right wing, have been battling this neoliberal centre, which is the one that's been advancing the agenda of authoritarianism and restriction on civil liberties accelerated since 9/11. But that analysis is bewildering to traditional left gatekeepers who can't really get their head around that. You know, that basically the traditional left-right paradigm is now completely obsolete. What we should be looking at is who is doing what to whom. Whose agenda is being served. Yesterday, we saw riot police silencing dissent. That's classic fascism.
Yes.
You know, so to accuse those being silenced of fascism, because amongst them are fellow travellers who may group under banners with which we disagree, is frankly idiotic. It's an inversion of what the genuine case is. I mean, for example, Sadiq Khan, and I quote yesterday, reacting to the events in Trafalgar Square, the Mayor of London, of course, said, "The reckless and violent behaviour of some protesters has left hard-working police officers injured and put the safety of our city at risk. This is totally unacceptable. Violence of this kind towards officers will not be tolerated, and perpetrators will feel the full force of the law." Well, I've seen numerous video clips from Trafalgar Square at the time of the violence and photographs from very genuine people, some of which I've known for many years. And from what I can tell, all the violence was perpetrated by police officers who rushed the stage in full riot gear, wielding truncheons. I haven't seen any images of injured police officers, quite a few images of injured protesters. And the demonstration yesterday started with a minute's silence towards for the officer that was shot dead in Croydon on Friday morning. I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So Khan is lying. It's as simple as that.
Well, isn't he doing the classic Leninist trick of accusing your opponent of doing the very thing that you yourself have done?
That's right. Exactly.
So, Sadiq Khan.
He's got to go. He's also said that he wants to see everyone in London wearing a mask in public.
God, are you kidding me?
If it saves just one life.
Oh, is that where we're at now? If it saves just one life, that old chestnut. That old chestnut.
In which case, we should all get out of our cars. Because
we should all just not go outside, full stop.
That's right. It's back to the concrete bunker eating mung bean dal, But as one wee wag said, if we're all to wear a mask in public, if it saves just one life, then perhaps we're all to wear a stab vest as well.
Yeah, so, stop the cars. What else? What else can you die from? There's 1,000 different things that you can do if it's about saving one life.
Bicycles very dangerous,
How many people die a year from misdiagnosis by a doctor or from a reaction to pharmaceutical medication? I mean, it's in the thousands, right? So you could save one life within that group of large group of people.
Yeah.
So ban drugs.
Yeah. So the demonstration yesterday was broken up, theoretically at least, on the grounds that people were not social distancing, were not keeping 6 feet apart from each other. Obviously, they were huddled together in large numbers without wearing masks. But from the evidence of other recent demonstrations where people have behaved in the same way, this has not caused a spike in COVID cases. The next idea being floated is for the over 45s to stay indoors.
Oh, they keep moving. They keep moving the age down.
Semi-permanent basis.
What?
Well, I mean, at least until the whole pandemic is completely and utterly over. But yes, this was in the Mail today. It's at the moment only being floated as a possible policy, but scientists are considering the plan for everyone over the age of 45 to shield at home, and this is still under review. So
it was 50. It was 50 years old last month. First it was 70, then they moved down to 50. Now it's 45. If they can get it down to 30, that's the age in Logan's Run that they just sort of like snuff everybody. Get rid of them when they turn 30. They send them to the little, a ritual place, and they just sort of into the incinerator. Basically, you're no longer useful to society.
That's right. In the meantime, of course, the damage to the economy and to some sectors in particular is continuing to multiply. I mean, it looks like there will be no gatherings of any meaningful size, whether football matches, nightclubs, concerts, theatres or anything else, until the spring, which means that, nightclubs and concert halls will have been shut for a full year. And the entertainment industry is in danger of total collapse.
Yeah, so many industries.
So many industries, yes. But it seems nobody's too bothered about that. So there we are. That's the current state with the coronavirus. A few other stories I want to get through quickly. Ongoing, of course, in the background and totally ignored by the corporate media has been the trial of Julian Assange, with various witnesses for the defense appearing last week, and the US case for extradition appearing to be in tatters. If we had an impartial judge and a transparent process of justice, then I'm given to believe it would be thrown out, because while they originally argued that Assange was not a journalist, that he was a spy and his prosecution under the Espionage Act, the US have apparently moved the goalposts and are now saying, yes, he is a journalist. And he, along with any other journalist that exposes state crimes, will be prosecuted. So, almost the worst aspect of the whole Assange thing is the fact that the Graniad, the BBC and everybody else have been so 100% silent. If it weren't for Craig Murray queuing up every day and getting into the public gallery and giving us these detailed reports and transcripts of what's being said, we would have no record whatsoever.
Yeah, there's a few other good independent journalists I know. Mohammed El-Mazi, he writes for Sputnik. He's keeping a close eye on it, but by far the best is Craig Murray. Just his knowledge of the case of law, of legal backwards and forwards is just incredible. That he picks up the nuance. He knows what's important, what's key. He's brilliant. CraigMurray.org. That's his blog. You'll get up to speed pretty quickly there.
Interestingly, a lot of the same sort of faces that have been supporting Julian over the last few years were present in Trafalgar Square yesterday. And interesting too that the traditional left is absent from the Assange trial solidarity support movement. It's very much that the Assange trial is a very good indicator of where the battle lines are being drawn. For some reason, the traditional left at the moment don't seem to be really very concerned with freedom of speech. But internationally, he's received messages of support in the last week or so from former president of Brazil, Lula da Silva, from a collective of international sort of politicians and statesmen who stand for the most part outside the neoliberal imperialist phalanx, including a group of Czech politicians I saw last week. So pressure would seem to be building for the case to collapse. But whether or not Judge Baritzer is going to be sort of impartial and transparent and come to a judgment based on the evidence, or whether she's already decided which way she's going to jump, that remains to be seen.
Yeah, just based on the fact that I was there at the hearing sessions that were before lockdown at Belmarsh Prison at the Woolwich Crown Court there, and also before that at a previous hearings at Westminster Crown Court. And what I thought about Judge Vanessa Baritzer is that she was anything but neutral and objective. She has, I think, denied requests from the defense at almost every turn. He's not getting access to his legal team. He shouldn't even be in prison. If he's unconvicted and doesn't have any charges on him other than a bail skipping charge based on an investigation in Sweden that's already been dropped. So, there's no reason that he's being incarcerated in a supermax prison and being treated like a terrorist, basically. So that's the state trying to stack the deck against him and make it very as difficult as possible for the defense. But it's also, I said this from the beginning, it's to take Julian off grid, basically, because if he was allowed to be on Twitter or social media or anything like that, I mean, he would just wreak havoc on Twitter with anything that's going on in the world, because he's very intelligent, great commentator, he cuts right through the BS. And he is a massive threat to the establishment, just being free. And they locked him up after Skripal because he was just causing a whirlwind of hell on Twitter, exposing stuff in the wake of the whole Skripal charade. So, yeah, he shouldn't be on ice. He should be at least with an ankle tag in a house or a flat somewhere, and able to meet with his legal team every day like any normal person has a right to, but he's not given that.
Well, again, the attitude of the state towards Assange, and I don't like using this term because it's been overused to the point where it is becoming meaningless, but nevertheless, I'm going to. The attitude of the British state towards the legal process that Assange is involved in, and him personally, is fascistic, in denying him bail, in continuing to keep him in solitary confinement, and, these are the actions not of a liberal state that wants to be transparent and to see that justice is seen to be done and be compassionate towards citizens. It's the position of an authoritarian state. But again, we have silence from the left, and particularly shameful is the silence of The Guardian, who, of course, published Julian's work only to then dump it when the heat under the boiling frog was turned up.
Yes. Yeah, The Guardian. Oh, don't get me started. Don't even want to go there.
No. So, moving swiftly on, a story came out last week, which was as revealing as it was entertaining. I don't know if you saw this, Patrick, that Benjamin Netanyahu takes literally, and I don't mean just figuratively, takes his dirty linen, his dirty laundry, his soiled clothes and sheets or whatever to Washington to take advantage of the White House laundry service.
What?
Did you not see that?
I thought it was a joke. I didn't know he actually did it.
Oh, no, it's literally true.
What? Oh, that's just weird.
It is, isn't it? But
maybe he was hoping to do a swap, switch his sheets to get some White House presidential linen. You know what I mean? Some betting.
Benjamin and Sarah Netanyahu have developed a reputation for lugging bags and suitcases of dirty clothes on foreign trips to be laundered at another country's expense.
Is that some sort of spy spook angle there, or is that just some weird OCD hang-up fetish thing? What's going on there?
I've no idea. I mean, you draw your own conclusions is all I'll say. But as a White House source, an unnamed US official said that after multiple trips, it became clear that this was intentional. The Israeli Prime Minister's office has denied the allegation. It's not the first time he's been accused of taking soiled clothes abroad for a rinse.
What a vagabond.
In 2018, leaked transcripts emerged containing allegations that Sarah Netanyahu packed 4 or 5 suitcases worth of laundry for state trips.
So he's a vagabond.
So, carpetbagger, whatever. Schnorrer, actually, to use the Yiddish term, it's a schnorrer.
But listen. I have to intervene. This makes no sense whatsoever, because wouldn't he in Israel be using a kosher linen laundry company? And they do have kosher linen in Israel. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, he's not kosher. That's bizarre.
Well, he's not that bothered about that. He's not that religious, Netanyahu, from what I can tell.
Right.
So
it's just strange.
Yeah. Anyway, there we go. Andrew Neil was in the news this week as well. I don't know if you saw that.
Yes.
He is to front a new national news service in the UK called GB News, which is funded by Discovery Inc.
Who's owned by?
You tell me, Patrick.
I'm pretty sure owned by Disney, but I might be wrong. Go ahead. Mm-hmm. I'll look that up while we Carry on.
I'm not sure it is. It's a public company.
Okay.
Current key people, Robert Miron, chairman, and David Zaslav, president and CEO. They also own Eurosport, Group 9 Media. But no, there doesn't appear to be a Disney tie-up. It'll be interesting to see what political line it takes.
Right.
It's supposed to be for people who do not feel that their views are represented either by the BBC or Sky News, the only two rolling news services in the UK since the demise of ITN News many years ago now. So that'll be interesting. A rival for the UK column, GB News is what it's due to be called.
Okay, I think Oprah Winfrey has a stake in this Discovery Communications Incorporated. And it looks like she's involved. So at least on the cable side. And so but as with all these media conglomerates, there's quite a few big players with their fingers in the pie. So what do you think this means? Is it going to be edgy for 6 months or a year and then be tucked into the mainstream? How do you think this is going to go?
Well, that's what I was thinking. If it's going to be edgy at any time, it's likely to be at the launch when it's possible that one or two sort of rogues could slip through the net, through the casting net, as it were. But I don't expect you'll be a regular guest, Patrick. Put it that way.
Do you think David Icke will be on?
Yeah, he'll have his own show, an hour a night at 8:00 every evening.
So that's interesting. Andrew Neil's 71 years old, so he's no spring chicken, but he's still got a few good years left, right?
Well, what you can say is that I'm not a huge fan, but he does at least put people on the spot. He did have David Icke on that politics program once this week or whatever it's called, when famously Michael Portillo, who's the one of the weekly pundits, was sort of dismissing Icke and everything he stood for and everything he's written. And so David asked him, well, have you ever actually read any of my books? To which Portillo had to admit that he hadn't, so it's sort of like, well, how do you know I'm talking rubbish then? There's something of the independent spirit about Andrew Neil still, I think there may be a sort of libertarian / right tinge to the output, while of course doubtless remaining extremely safe on anything genuinely controversial.
Yes. He doesn't like me. He blocked me on Twitter because I had to go at him about he was banging on about the Russians, basically. I think interfering in our democracy, what the usual line. And I had to go at him, and he just blocked me straight away. Piers Morgan did the same thing. So I've been blocked by some good people, some quality people blocked me, Yeah.
That's right. We are defined these days by who blocks us on Twitter.
That's right. That's right.
So moving swiftly on, the US election, of course, starting to hove into view. The dreaded Pelosi was doubling down on her request that Biden not debate Trump. She doesn't want Joe in the firing line.
I can't imagine why.
And of course, Michael Bloomberg has intervened, paying the fines and court debts of no fewer than 31,000 Floridians so that they can vote.
Unbelievable.
It would be nice to be able to afford to pay the fines of 31,000 people, wouldn't it? And not miss the money, Patrick.
Talk about manufacturing votes. Holy cow.
Well, one wonders about the legality of it, whether or not it's a form of bribery,
Well, yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me if it was challenged in the courts.
Unbelievable. There's the Democrats. There's no limits. Pulling out all the stops.
That's right. And then finally, what's got to be my favorite story of the week, really, from the Huffington Post. The death of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg pushed me to join the Satanic Temple. From Jamie Smith, a guest writer. I'm a 40-something attorney and mother who lives in a quiet neighborhood with a yard and a garage full of scooters and soccer balls. I am not the type of person who would normally consider becoming a Satanist, but these are not normal times. So if anyone was in any doubt, this is indeed the apocalypse. I offer this as item number one in my list of evidence for the week.
Well, that makes Ruth Bader Ginsburg an icon of the Satanist, the Church of Satan. So that's quite a honor to have bestowed upon you after the fact. But this is part of this kind of what I call pop-up cults or pop-up religions, pop-up demigods, deities, the canonization of people like John McCain purely because he had a rivalry or an argument with Donald Trump. So she's more popular than Biden, Basil. I think she'd probably win as a writing candidate more than Biden. She could be the first president, like to run the country from beyond, right?
Who, Ginsburg?
Yeah, she has a better chance, I think, than Biden.
Yeah. Well, we did see what was it? Some sports players, football players last week wearing lace collars. Did you see that? After the fashion.
No, that was from the Babylon Bee.
Right.
That was a satire article.
Ah.
But if you fell for it, don't feel bad because the editor of Vogue retweeted it. She thought it was wonderful. And a bunch of other mainstream journalists just, they retweeted it. They had no idea it was satire. That's how good the Babylon Bee is getting. They're absolutely on fire right now.
Yeah.
BabylonBee.com.
So there we are, Patrick. That's our little roundup for the week. Culture-wise, of course, there's virtually nothing to report because culture's been stone dead, killed stone dead.
Culture, what's that?
Exactly, yeah. Sport is sort of limping on behind closed doors, but outside the Premier League, there are dire warnings that a number of football clubs could go into administration in the coming months because outside the Premier League, of course, they do rely heavily on match day income from supporters to pay the wages. And so with no match day income at all from people through the turnstiles, then the lower league clubs are in grave danger, as are the race courses with no prospect of sizable crowds returning to race courses before Christmas and more likely before March. So we're going to have a jump season like none ever before it, just as we've had a flat season like none other before it, with empty stands. And of course, again, that hugely impacts revenue.
Are we going to go back to the days where the footballers had full-time jobs on the side?
No, I don't think so. No, maybe in some of the lower leagues they may have to look at that. But I mean, what jobs?
Well, track and trace. They could do COVID work.
That's right. Become a COVID marshal.
Yeah, COVID marshalling, track and trace, lots of stuff.
Yeah. That's where we are this week, Patrick.
Well, that's thoroughly depressing.
Well,
it's a weird and wacky world, isn't it? It's just getting...
Absolutely, but we have to remain optimistic. Optimism should not be influenced by day-to-day events. Optimism is a state of mind, a sort of spiritual tenet. It isn't something that should be dictated to by the drama unfolding in front of us.
That's right. This show is a cathartic experience, really. This is like Orwell's 2 Minutes of Hate, but only for 2 hours, a weekly ritual that people can exorcise these demons off of the headline pages and get them out into the ether and away, and remain optimistic, because it's a state of mind. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely. But it is funny, isn't it? Some of the stuff is just too weird and funny. We have to comment on it to put it in its proper perspective.
Yeah. Well, it seems the battle lines are being drawn with the repeal of the Coronavirus Act due through Parliament next week, and the possible rebellion by up to 50 Conservative MPs who are demanding that any emergency powers be debated in Parliament and that there is a vote on them. So, for the first time for quite some time, Parliament is at least attempting to assert some authority in the face of the executive. Whether or not they're successful, or whether or not any of these measures are voted down, remains to be seen. Khan, of course, is threatening a total lockdown in London.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's
petty dictator.
Exactly, but London's been in a semi-lockdown, a twilight zone since March.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the streets are deserted in the evenings. Theatres are all dark. Half the pubs are dark. It's nothing like the same level of activity that there was. So
let's cross our fingers that democracy breaks out in Westminster. There's an outbreak of democracy this week, hopefully, yeah?
Yes, that's about the best that we can hope for.
Good. I like the sound of it already, so it's something to look forward to this week. A hard-spirited, relevant debate in Parliament over the Coronavirus Act.
We also have next weekend something else to look forward to, which is the richest race in Europe, the Prix de l'Arc de Triomphe at Longchamp, the autumn championship race over 1.5 miles, where Khalid Abdallah's Enable is bidding to win the race for the third time, having won it in 2017, 2018, and finished second last year. She is opposed by, amongst others, the 13-8 favourite, a horse that glories in the delightful name Love, trained by the Irish maestro Aidan O'Brien. And the two face off over 1.5 miles next Sunday, along with about a dozen other runners. So we do at least have that to look forward to.
I'm putting my money on Love. I don't like the sound of enable in this political environment. It reminds me of the Hitler's Enabling Act.
That's it. It's strange how these names pop up sometimes. I remember one day many years ago, a horse called Dueling Banjos was running. And of course, the Dueling Banjos is one of the iconic scenes from the film Deliverance, starring.
Oh, don't.
And that film was being broadcast on the same day that Dueling Banjos was running.
Oh, goodness gracious.
And Dueling Banjos duly won.
Oh.
The day that Deliverance was transmitted, and the film isn't on very often.
Yeah, for good reason.
That's right. And another one was the day of Prince William and Catherine's wedding, few years ago. 10 years ago now or something. There was a horse running called Royal Wedding on the day of their wedding. And that won as well.
Wow. Okay.
It's
So
called-
something to pay attention to.
It's called harmonic co-resonance. That's what people sometimes call it. And it's the sort of, it's the parallel universe trying to communicate with us and give us clues as to the nature of reality, which is indeed all a dream.
Yes. Oh, that's a good point to round off on. I like the sound of that. So pay attention to those horses.
That's
pay attention
right.
to those horses.
Yeah.
Well, thank you Basil. That's all we have time for this week. I want to thank you very much for your insight and wisdom again this week at the Sunday Wire.
Thank you, Patrick.
And do take care, and hope you're doing well down there on the South Coast. And also, thank you to everybody listening this week to the show. I want to say thank you to all of our listeners, everybody who's downloaded the Brave browser as well. Look on the show page. You'll see the Brave banners all over our site. Download Brave. Is one of the fastest, cleanest, and most ethical digital tech companies out there. Great surfing experience, and they don't track and harvest your data. And you can also strip out all the ads on your browser, fully customizable. Get it for free from 21 Wire. And if you do, Brave throws some of their crypto coins in our tip jar. They're BAT coins. So that's one way you can support 21 Wire, but also get a great product for free in return and have a great internet surfing experience. Brave is awesome. It's right up there with Firefox as one of the top browsers right now on the internet. Look for the Brave browser. And also support ACR, the Alternate Current Radio Network. On the show page, you'll see the link to Alternate Current Radio at the top. Click on there and do consider donating or becoming a patron to ACR. This is a fantastic independent network. It hosts this show. It hosts The Boiler Room. It hosts many other great original programs, Ruckus as well, and also a number of great music shows on ACR. So support ACR, the Alternate Current Radio Network. They need your help going forward as well. That's it, ladies and gentlemen. That's the show. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. And this was a very heavy but very special broadcast as well. And we'll be passing through to a new epoch and saying goodbye to some old friends and some colleagues and people that we admire, and then moving forward, take what they've taught us going forward, the lessons they've learned and shared with the world as journalists, as pundits like Stephen Cohen, like Andrei Vilcek, and we'll take those going forward into the next years and decades. Take care, everybody. All the best.